right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. Obviously, the Prague Pro was the biggest story of the weekend. We've got a couple stories associated with that and aside from that. But first off, the classic physique portion of the Prague Pro. Terrence Ruffin has won his fourth show of the year, winning the Prague show. Of course, he also won the Pittsburgh Pro, the New York Pro, the Brazil Pro, third at the Olympia, and now winning Prague. So 5 shows this year, top 3 at the Olympia, and 4 professional wins. Absolutely stunning posing routine at this show. And again, I want to shout out Rep 1. They have some of the more clear, best videos that I've seen of this show. And when I saw this video of Terrence, I mean, do you guys agree that Terrence, I think, looks better here than he looked at the Olympia? I think he looks a little bit sharper, a little bit tighter. I think you can see some finer details. I mean, maybe it's the lighting, but I honestly think Terrence looks better here than he looked at the Olympia. And I think that Terrence is a great example of how lucky we are that this era of bodybuilding right now has been so exciting. Like I said, Terrence is a top Olympia contender. A lot of people even had Terrence winning the Olympia this year. And we've seen him compete 5 times this year. And even looking back at Prague, Samson Dowda was reigning Mr. Olympia when the year started. He's now competed 3 times this year, the Arnold, the Olympia, and Prague. You have Derek, and again, I know people don't like him. He won the Olympia, but he also did the Arnold in Pittsburgh and won those too. And I feel like when you look at this era in bodybuilding and what guys like Terrence and Samson and even Derek are doing, I kind of look back at like the 2010s era, like the Phil Heath era, the Flex Lewis era. You didn't see a reigning Mr. Olympia do 3 shows in a year. They kind of just focused on the Olympia. You didn't really see reigning Mr. Olympias get beaten outside of the Olympia because they didn't do those shows. You didn't see all these crossovers like we're seeing, 3-time 212 Mr. Olympia Keon Pearson compete in a random open show. We're seeing Sean Clarita, a multiple-time 212 Mr. Olympia, compete in open shows still. 6-time Mr. Olympia Chris Bumstead last year competed in an open show. Derek Lunsford himself is a crossover from 212 to winning the Open Olympia 2 times. You just didn't really have all of this stuff in like the previous decade of bodybuilding, and I feel like the 2025, 2020s post-COVID era, we're seeing a lot of exciting things happen. We get to see a guy like Terrence compete 5 times in a year. We get to see 2 Mr. Olympias between the 2 of them compete 6 times in a year. Between Derek and Samson, that was 6 times competing. So I know that's kind of a tangent, but while you're watching this beautiful video of Terrence, I just think that just take a moment to appreciate like how active these past couple years in bodybuilding have been and how often we get to see these top guys competing. And again, with Terrence, there was another thing too this weekend where he actually asked the head judge, Steve Weinberger, I guess this was at the athlete check-ins, and I saw this also on Rep 1. And he gave some clarification here that I think a lot of people wanted about the hiding in Classic Physique. So according to Steve and according to this interaction, the hiding for Classic Physique will be done at the Olympia for the guys that competed in the Olympia. Then for the rest of the year, that's apparently going to be their height going into any other show. Then they're going to be re-heighted at the Olympia. Then that's their height for the following year. So what I don't know, though, is if you don't compete at the Olympia, if you're not an Olympian Classic Physique guy, and there's lots of guys who aren't, do you just get re-heighted every single time you compete throughout the year? But it sounds like if you're an Olympian, that's kind of the plan going forward, is you're going to get re-heighted at the Olympia. That's your height for the rest of the year. Then you're re-heighted again the next year. So he did get us some clarification on that. So shout out to Terrence kind of asking that tough question. Now, next up in the news, I know this was a couple days ago, but I've just been focused on Prague this weekend, so I haven't really been looking at this other stuff. Nick Walker parts with his coach officially, his coach Kyle Wilkes, who prepped him for the Olympia, he prepped him for Pittsburgh, and he prepped him for the New York show. So on this Unracked podcast, where you have 3 different prep coaches kind of discussing this topic, he talks about the manner in which Nick Walker parted ways with him. He gave him a phone call, and I thought one of the takeaways, which was the takeaway for Kyle, was that Nick said apparently on that phone call that he wasn't happy with the Pittsburgh look. And that was surprising to his coach, and I think that's surprising to me and probably to a lot of you guys to hear, because I think that was probably Nick's maybe best look ever, aside from maybe the Arnold that he won in 2021. But it certainly sounds like the root of them parting ways was the Olympia placing and the Olympia look. And I kind of sympathize with his coach in this situation because he makes a good point in saying it's kind of like you spend all this time working with somebody and you're kind of practicing, like you're learning as you go, and you're learning show to show, you're learning what to change, what to fix, what to tweak. Then you take that information into the next show, tweak it, and try to bring a better package. So it's like you spend all this time, all these different preps, learning about your client, and then they kind of just take that on to the next coach, and you don't even get the opportunity to take that information and try to apply it to another show and do better. And I think it raises the question with Nick, and I think especially in Nick's case, because the reason why this is newsworthy is because this is not a new thing for Nick. I think the biggest story of, I guess it was last year at this point, was the breakup of Nick and Matt Jansen. And that breakup was rooted in Nick not doing the Olympia in 2024. And then also, of course, Nick had missed the prior year's Olympia as well. And Nick and Matt seemed especially close. The breakup between them seemed especially, bad. It seemed like there was bad blood. And it seems like that's the case here too, because apparently Kyle and Nick have unfollowed each other on Instagram. And apparently they've been longtime friends. And Nick had worked with Kyle previously prior to working with Matt. And it kind of makes you wonder, is the coach the issue in Nick's situation? Or is Nick the issue? Because to Kyle's credit, it does kind of seem like it was an emotional response from Nick. You have one bad placing and then ditch your coach. And that seems to be kind of Nick's MO, is like an emotional reaction and, splitting with the coach. But to Kyle's credit, yeah, the Olympia wasn't a great look for Nick, but Pittsburgh was. And Nick won New York again with Kyle. So 2 out of 3 shows were kind of home runs. In one bad placing, instead of, okay, let's take this information, tweak it, learn from it, and do better next time, it's like I'm just going to find somebody else. And then what does that say for the future of Nick's career? Is he too impulsive? Is he too emotional? Is he changing coaches too often? Is this part of the problem? And it is kind of disappointing because Nick had all this momentum this year, and momentum generated from his work with Kyle. And that momentum now, I kind of feel like I'm back in the camp of maybe Nick will never be back in the top 3 at the Olympia. Maybe it is a Nick thing that Nick can't overcome. And I think another point that they brought up in this podcast, they said, a lot of this like switching coaches thing, bodybuilders jumping from coach to coach, they feel like maybe the bodybuilder thinks the next coach is going to have some secret, some X factor answer that the previous coach didn't. And that's not the case, in that a good coaching relationship really just comes from communication and working on and learning from these preps, even if there are mistakes or there's, things they can fix. It's like this learning process of figuring it out over time that makes a good coaching relationship. And there is no really secret answer that one coach has over another. It's really just about learning the client. And so it makes me wonder, what's next for Nick? Who will his next coach be? Will he have a coach? Will it reflect positively or negatively on his physique? And I think, to be fair, maybe sometimes the role of a coach could be overstated. I mean, Hadi Chupin, I think everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people thought Hadi should have won the Olympia this year. I'm sure a lot of people watching this video think that. This was the first year that Hadi didn't have a coach. Hani Rambod legitimately did not prep Hadi for this show. He did it on his own, or with whoever helped him, maybe someone in Iran, but like no big coach. Hani wasn't working with him. He still almost won the Olympia. Derek Lunsford switched coaches. He started working with Chris Aceto. He won 3 shows in a year, 2 of them, the Olympia and the Arnold, and then Pittsburgh. Ramon Dino I think Ramon is a good example of this. Ramon spent years working with Aceto in not getting that win. He waited, he was patient, they learned, and he got the win. So to be fair to Nick, too, sometimes a new coach is a good thing. Sometimes no coach is a good thing. Samson Dauda is a prime example of that. Samson won the Olympia working with his wife on it with his prep. So to be fair, switching coaches a lot, jumping from coach to coach, maybe the role of a coach could be overstated when a bodybuilder is at a certain level. Maybe it doesn't even matter who's coaching you. Once you're at the top and you've got that size, you've got those genetics, you've already won these top tier shows, you've already got a physique that if you're in somewhat reasonable shape, you're going to do well. And maybe it doesn't even matter who coaches you when you're at that level. And then you got to wonder, like, how much of the coach versus athlete is responsible. Like, how much of it was the coach making mistakes in Nick's case? How much of it was Nick, not following the protocol or not following the diet or, straying from this or straying from that? We don't know. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you think of the split between Nick and Kyle? What do you think the real motivation was, if there was something deeper behind it? And who do you think Nick's next coach is going to be, if he has one? And what do you think the next show he's going to do is going to be? I hope it's the Arnold. Now, next up in the news, we do have the official scorecards from the Prague Pro for open bodybuilding. Martin Fitzwater and Samson Dauda. It was as close as it looked at both prejudging and finals. A 1-point decision at prejudging and a 1-point decision at the finals. Martin with a score of 4 at both prejudging and finals. Samson with a score of 5, so a very close battle between those two. Michael Crizzo improving from prejudging to finals. As we noticed, he looked a lot better at the finals than he looked at the prejudging, improving his score by 1 point with 10 at prejudging and 9 at the finals. Keon Pearson and Joan Purdells battling it out. So Keon could have been 5th at prejudging. He was actually tied with Joan Purdells 13-13 at prejudging. Keon broke the tie at the finals. Actually, really, technically, Joan broke it, because I guess that would mean Joan got worse if Joan's score got higher. I think that Keon did get better for the prejudging, but Joan ended up with 14-13, putting Keon in the 4th place spot and breaking that tie. So rounding out the top 6, Jan Turek was in 6th, Tim Budesheim in 7th, Pavel Baron in 8th, Damian Kuffel in 9th, and rounding out the top 10, Josef Kvetin. That was the dude with the beard and the tattoos. And I just want to point out, he had incredible condition. He was very impressive looking at this show. I really liked his physique. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my 3rd YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.